Is this Eden? If so, then give me the fucking apple. I don't need Eve when I can sabotage my own battles. With that being said, welcome back to Silly Whales. This is a mental health podcast. We discuss things that, can be a little bit on the touchy side. Things that require trigger warnings. This is one giant trigger warning. So we discuss things like suicide, mental illness, all those things. It's okay. It was not for you. As I like to say, this podcast is for literally everyone. Even that little cat. Even the dog. Okay? Anyone. But it might not be for you. And we're not going to hunt you down. Because silly whales get hunted. It's not good. Anyway, yeah. Joe's back.
Hey!
I really wish I had a soundboard to press it so we can get like the thing.
Whoa! Yeah!
We've been gone for a while. Like a part of me's been gone too.
I think March has been a terrifying month.
Yeah. But we'll discuss all of this in the journal. But, if you've been with us before, and if you haven't, we do a segment where we discuss the news in the week of mental health, and it is called Mental Health This Week. It's time for Mental Health This Week. Yes, it's time for Mental Health This Week, where we discuss the news in mental health. I said that already before the transition, but we're going to do it again anyway, just so you guys are clear. And when I segment this into clips for social media virality, it makes my life a lot easier. Anyway, the first story is, a touchy one. I feel like it's going to be a tough one as it discusses literal suicide and mental health. What do you call them? Mental health service, an inpatient service.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about Oxevision because that has been used in multiple cases up and down the UK in which you can track. What is it exactly you can track again, Joe? Because I did not pull up the article. It tracks your heart rate, it tracks your heat signature, and it's a way to probably provide surveillance on you without having to physically check on you.
Yeah, pulse rate and breathing is what's said in the article.
Jesus Christ. There's multiple things wrong with this. And before we started recording, myself and Joe were discussing this. We really couldn't find many, if any, upsides to this being used everywhere and being made the norm. And when you have a case of somebody losing their lives due to the negligent use of this, surely the first thing we're doing is we're just shutting it down completely, right?
To give a bit of context for this as well, so the from The Guardian, there is a particular person who is spoken about, Morgan Rose Hart, who sadly lost her life, and she was under the I don't know what's the term, I guess under the surveillance of this Oxevision thing, which is this. Effectively, it's just a kind of camera that is able to, check all these things on you. But essentially, it means that when you're in a room and you have this camera that is looking at you and is able to measure these things without the need for a physical presence to enter the room and then do these checks instead. Now, the immediate, and clearly for this individual, based on what she said to her mum, and also what the general outlining of the problems of this are, is that generally speaking, if you have someone who is dealing with lots of difficulties in mental health, certainly I think about someone with psychosis, for example, although I don't believe that was the case with Morgan Rose Hart, having a camera that constantly watches you in your room and is effectively acting on occasion as and is then not requiring a person to come in and do certain checks on you. Again, what it's saying that in the article that it's able to do is are relatively minor things, in my opinion. For for the purposes of like checking heart rate and breathing rate and so on, that you're okay. So now we're not having a person come into the room, and to me, like that just immediately screams like, hey, this is an opportunity for a person to think that they're under like that they're going to have some sort of conspiracy under like real big surveillance of someone, which I mean they are being under surveillance, but not in quite the way that it is really. But then immediately we start thinking, okay, well, this is actually still a camera. This is still watching them. So in terms of their ability to have any privacy or dignity and things like that, even something as like purely harmless as pleasuring yourself is something that you're going to feel suddenly very awkward about, whatever time it is. Like
you can't
it's
have a fucking wank in peace.
You can't, and it's kind of it's slightly strange because as we were reading this article, and I think this article is really trying to state something. This is The Guardian. I think it's trying to state that this is existing and that there is like, oh, look, we're going to talk about the people from Oxevision who say it's a good thing. And then we're going to talk about like, and then we're going to talk about the patients who actually experience it. But I mean, it's very difficult not to come out of this thinking that it's really fucking weird and that and that I'm not going to take seriously far more the patients who have actively had an experience who are saying, like Safina, I don't know anything else. I think it was something about the camera and it always being on and it's right above your bed. Like literally the experience of that is the first thing you see when you open your eyes, the last thing when you go to sleep. I was just in a constant state of hypervigilance. I was completely traumatized. I still felt too scared to sleep properly. Where it's like, what the fuck is the point of this? Like,
yeah,
to have that kind. I'm trying to think.
It also doesn't work.
Like, yeah, I'm trying to think in my head like when like any scenario in which a camera is constantly watching me in which I would feel comfortable, like ever in any scenario.
The thing is, it failed. It already failed because when Miss Hart
Morgan,
was discovered, it had already she was unobserved for 50 minutes. So, like, it's just
yeah. So effectively, what's meant to happen is that an alert goes off saying that the person's been in the bathroom for more than 3 minutes because obviously they haven't got it literally looking in the bathroom, but they're monitoring.
The machine was reset.
Yeah, because staff just did it. Just reset it instead. Now there is a part there where it's like clearly the staff doing that is it makes is a bad thing to do. But it seems it seems weird to me but the thing is I'm tripping over my words because I'm trying to say multiple things at once. On the one hand, the expectation of how this is meant to be used, or a better way of saying it is that the use of this is in many ways to remove the amount of this requirement for like in-person visits and things like that. But I feel like that creates an immediate gap between the patient and then the people who are meant to be taking care of them. And I think it then makes it much harder, and especially when you're talking about like 3 minutes in a bathroom. I mean, I spend more than 3 minutes when I go to the toilet most times, right? I'm not particularly like, I don't want someone coming in every single time that happens. So I imagine that it was, even in most people's minds, I think the first time it happens, you probably don't even think that much of it, and you just press a button and be like, okay, well, I'm sure they're fine. There's a kind of weird space where obviously there is definitely people who, if this was actually actively being used, that there are people who really need to follow to a very strict rule. But it seems slightly, but having this form of surveillance feels worse than just having people who are kind of around and present and things like that, where there is a very different sort of, I guess, moral duty or like moral expectation on the individual. So this is a moment of where, even though, like in that specific example, someone could go, well, Oxevision didn't really do that to that person. Although, again, we've already talked about how we feel about the idea of being surveillanced by something like this, and the problems we might have there. But also the fact that technology has the ability to make things easier in such a way as to make us less invested in the thing that it's making easier. So the idea of this thing doing the work for you and effectively reducing what the relationship would be between a nurse and a patient means that I think it's quite a, even if we just think about this in a societal legal system, maybe we shouldn't be relying on these sorts of things, because I think it could influence people poorly towards that. On top of the fact that I already think that it's fucking creepy and weird, and it clearly isn't a lot of people seem to would have a problem with it.
Like, I want to look at this is the cases of its use, but before we move on, the cases that we've had people die from it. For me, do you know what I feel like is happening? I feel like we're in a state now where the stigma of being in a mental health service as an inpatient is so strong, and cases like Oxevision and the constant, very public displays of negligence, the stigma is growing. So if you actually need help, and being an inpatient might be the best thing for you, you're now unlikely to go and use these services. Or if you're admitted to it on the section in Act, you're going to be resistant to a treatment. And I just don't see why it's so hard to treat patients with dignity. And it's consecutive governments, it's consecutive policymakers, and it's like they never have a lived experience of the stuff.
If I was really trying to be charitable and find the middle, or sort of like a path that does work with these two, I would still have sort of inpatient, like, person to person interaction still be an incredibly high factor. It's something like a form, an amount of surveillance that is, that is largely doesn't, that is able to, like, maybe turn off regularly, and you just have come on during certain times of the day, perhaps, maybe. Because I can see a world in which, because I understand that, like, at the end of the day, if the aim is to prevent someone from self-harm, I can see how, like, you are not able to be there all the time, and that in theory could be helpful. But I think there's just so many moral issues with, like, having a, like, if we started saying, okay, well, fine, we have this camera system, blah blah blah, whatever. What if the patient couldn't see the camera? And it's like, well, okay, that's a violation of their sort of rights and autonomy. We already kind of recognize that, so we can't get rid of the camera, like, visually, and we also can't have the camera visually because they're both bad. So then we have to go, okay, well, what if we have it only on some of the time? And it's like, well, how do I know that the camera's only on some of the time? How do I know that, and certainly in a bad mental state, how do I really know that when the light turns off, that means the camera's actually out? Like, how would I know that? How would I be able to trust these things? And if I was in a bad state mentally, I really would. I don't know if I would, I don't know if I would be able to do that. Keep in mind that, like, if an animal sees a camera, it doesn't know what it is. It has no concept of it. But human beings do know what cameras are. Like, at least, human beings who have existed in a world of media and so on. I mean, nowadays, like, a phone is considered a camera. Not that was always the case. We now consider it to be a form of surveillance device. Yeah. Where if someone has their phone out, I think, oh, wait. Sometimes I might see a weird angle that someone's holding a phone and think, oh, are they recording something? Or, like, are they recording me? Or, like, and with that suspicion alone is me having that recognition of what the object is. I don't know if there is a way that we could have this kind of system that isn't clearly, hey, someone is watching you, or you are being watched, you are being surveilled. Because as soon as you know that what that object is, it's like, okay, well, that object is. You have no idea how to determine if that object is watching you, and everything around that feels off. So yeah, I think from the get-go, there is a sort of death or doom knell to it. Death knell, yeah, doom. Death knell to to itself in the form of like, because we already recognize that there are problems with just having someone be under surveillance without their knowledge from a moral perspective. So yeah, and I come away from this feeling. I came away from reading this article feeling like I don't get what the aim really is for this beyond just trying to have things be done cheaper because you don't have to pay people to interact and have relationships with people, which feels pretty bad. And I think it makes way more sense if we start talking about people in like inpatient people who are like at extreme risk to others. Possibly, I could see the world in which that then becomes that this becomes a reality. But I think we're now talking about a very different class of issue or problem. We're not just talking about in the case of Miss Hart.
Shall we move on?
Yeah, I think so.
Cool. And the next, I just realized, did I pick both of these things for today?
Yeah, you brought them both up. Yeah.
Great. Cool. But I feel like okay, that's fine. I was just thinking, did Joe pick something today? Oh no, what have I done? Therapy. Therapy is a tool that I'm sure Joe advocate is a very useful tool in combating mental health and mental illness and things like that, be it managing your conditions, speaking, discussing something with someone who's licensed and really good at listening to you and understanding your problems as well as challenging you in different ways and imploring you to do better in your life. Therapy can be great. We're not sponsored by BetterHelp. However, if a company's going to launch some dumb shit like an AI chatbot, it's probably going to be them. Now, therapy is making its mark on the world. It's now a commonly discussed thing. AI is now on the rise, and research is pointing to the fact that I might be an old man getting a cloud, as the first therapy chatbot trial shows that AI can provide quote unquote gold standard care. I don't really know where to go with that.
We're very much in the tech we're in the tech meets mental health business here. This one's much more interesting. This one is way harder for me to have an immediate opinion on. Certainly, with the last thing as well, like with the last topic we were just discussing, part of the problem I have is that it is relatively recent that all of this has been occurring, and it feels like that it feels like there was a rush into it almost, because I don't feel like it was something that it felt like from reading the article that there should have been way more like reasonable kind of thought and like in play like discussion around whether it was a good thing or not even before it was used. This one I think is more interesting because, and also it was directly from a company who was selling this idea. This one is about it was performed at Dartmouth College, and it's a trial. We're not talking about a like a product being sold or anything like that. A trial with 106 people from across the United States diagnosed with major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, or an eating disorder. And this one's quite fascinating because the people diagnosed with depression experienced a 51% average reduction in symptoms. It's interesting, and I can actually kind of understand why it would work because, and the immediate thing that came to my mind, or at least maybe it percolated, was, how there are people who are really into like, to be fair, I think this phenomenon is bigger in Japan, but people who have like AI girlfriends effectively.
Yeah.
And that there are people who, and I don't think that those are like, do I think they're morally evil, bad things? No, not really. I don't think they're morally bad. I think they're probably not good to have because I think that there's better, I think that there are better avenues for people to experience like a feeling of love or a feeling of like, or like attachment, because so many of the discussions, I've watched a few things about it. So many of the things that come up is like it is the feeling of being like listened to, and the feeling of being like a feeling of both caring and being cared and heard. Yeah. So clearly there's a problem going on there, which has nothing to do with the fact that it's an AI thing, if that makes sense. Like there's clearly just it's clearly just this is a product that is this is a product that's like feeding off of the fact that there are people with these issues. But the idea of like a little bot that is effectively, I don't quite understand. I don't know the full thing apart from, you type out, there's sort of responses typed out and prompts given and things like that, and initiating conversations. That it's kind of like having an app that tells you, in maybe better, honestly, than something like like an inspirational quote, but like better than that, right? Like something that is much more, especially with oversight from a clinician, which is what it talks about needing to be the case with this. A way in which like you can be effectively prompted towards feeling better. Like kind of, hey, this is a problem or whatever. Listen, it's okay. Blah blah blah. Effectively, just encouragement, right? A form of that. I don't think it's. It would have to be done in such a way where it really doesn't play on parts of your mind or brain or whatever. Like even like the AI girlfriend stuff, obviously is trying to play on a particular aspect of your brain, on top of being like oh look, I'm trying to be nice to you or whatever, or I'm listening to you or whatever. It's not only playing on that, it's playing obviously on other aspects of the human experience. This, if you made this like super boring, but you just made it something that allowed you to kind of like think thoughts and stuff. I mean, imagine, for example, someone who had like a watch or something that could tell when they were having a panic attack, right? And then if the person knew that they could look at their watch and there would be something that would get them to, that would remind them of like little, of like little steps they could do to try and improve their situation, to breathe or like to look around the room and start naming things and things like that. Stuff that like people already kind of do on their own, but obviously helping people towards that point. I can kind of see a world in which like having an AI anxiety buddy or an AI like depression buddy being like genuinely quite a useful concept. It's obviously a very this is so like new, and I have no idea really what this could look like in the long run. And of course, as soon as we start talking about markets and shit, then we start going into all of that nonsense, where it's like, okay, well, who's the one that's going to try and make a big, like, make bucks out of this, and so on. But a kind of person, a person. This is the anthropomorphization of these things. Having effectively like someone is there to give you advice or to give you like insight or to give you, obviously it doesn't know anything, like I'm not describing it as if it's a person properly, but the concept of there is being a supporting person there to like help you in those situations, I just think is interesting. It's not, I don't have like a proper like, I can't lambast it in the same way I can the last one, which I think is a good thing, obviously. But I think it's an interesting concept, and I would almost want to be. I'd almost want to actually be there and see how it works, like how it's actually functionally doing what it's doing. Because I mean, there's stuff that they point out, like there is no replacement for in-person care, but there are nowhere near enough providers to go around. And like that was the thing that was thinking in my mind, like, oh yeah, I mean, genuinely, like, if you have that on top of the, the more like the longer interval periods between where you're actually going to talk to have an in-person conversation with someone, then something like this almost could be can be just a really like, a pretty like private way of balancing, your mental health and your emotional state. And doing so, I think, in a way that, is more healthy perhaps than something like social media or the other different ways that people, try to maintain their perceptions and things. Because especially if this is all it's doing, then it's really not it's not really changing your reality. You know what I mean? It's not like convincing you that the reason that your problems exist is because, there are immigrants in your country, like social media tries and things like that. It's like compared to many other things, I'm looking at this and being like, you know what? I really can see why this would be helpful, and I can even see for myself why this would be helpful in a weird way.
Like I want things like this to work, but I'm always erring towards side of caution with things like AI for a variety of different reasons. But again, unlike the last article about the Oxevision, as you said, I see a more positive outcome to this than anything. And these things already exist. So I think you mentioned it, and I mentioned it as well. But people speak to ChatGPT all the time anyway.
Yes.
So I don't know. I'm gonna happily say I don't know, but I hope for the best. Yeah, it's time for the journal, Old School Silly Wales, where we discuss our lives. It's been a while, so this might be a little bit longer than we normally have the segment. Joe, do you want to go first or do I want to go first?
You go first, I think.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we've had the Alex Cupid show 10 days ago, which I discussed how being an adult is hard. It is very hard. I'm struggling. Even when the good things from being an adult comes, I'm still struggling. I received my first paycheck, and I looked at it today as we were getting ready to record the show, and my reaction was pure anxiety at seeing a large amount of money in my account. Large for me. I'm sure if I send like a screenshot of my account to some of you guys watching, you'll look at me and go, "Huh, I can add a zero onto that." Well, you know what? You can go fuck yourself. How about that? You can go and do one. Okay? Look at me. I make money. Look at me. Shut the fuck up. How about that? Yeah? Anyway. Yeah, it's weird. And it's another thing of adulthood that I'm hating because it feels like when you have something like that, you're not worried about you're gonna spend all of it, and you're worried that you're gonna just waste it all. Or you're gonna regret. Like come the end of the month, are you gonna be decreeing where it all went? That's it.
It's a weird thing to begin. I mean, when I started working, much larger hours, like long, more hours in a week, because it took me time to get up to that point. It was it was very weird to be like, oh, I'm saving hundreds of pounds a month. Like that's just not a concept I had ever. I mean, the most I've had thousands in my account just only like while I was at uni because I've given like, I don't know, a bunch of money at once. And then what you would just watch it, but that is the money you have, and watching it slowly go down over the course of your term, your semester, or whatever at the uni, and then suddenly it goes back up again for the next one, and then you're just slowly watching it go down. So it's a very different relationship and experience. Whereas like now when I see that money, I still have that mental image in my head that it's going to go down, like at that sort of pace. But in reality, that's not true. Like even if I earned just enough to keep me alive now, it's not changing, right? Like if I worked barely enough just to be able to continue maintaining myself, that number wouldn't change, which isn't a good thing in the long run if we're including thinking about inflation and so on. But the fact that that number wouldn't change it's just not a concept I have in my head at all. Like it's just not something that I was able to think about. And then the reality is that it's probably going to go up, right? Like it's going to keep doing that. But then we get into the whole discussion about like what the future holds, and that money does end up going somewhere and going towards something for yourself. And so that sort of investment that's needed and so on. I don't like I don't like having a too much of a relationship with money like that. Um, but I can, but there is a point where I think if you have like actually, you know what? This is funny. We were talking about this. I was talking to you about value and how I've started to see money in a different way because I've started to kind of put a label to what the value of something is. So, for example, eating better food is if it requires more money. And when I say better food, I should be clear. I mean like healthier food and food that is even just providing a better like personal experience for me, such that I feel better. Then the value isn't really about like, oh, I can just buy more expensive food. It's no, money equals health at some level. There's like a value I've now attached to money, which is health being a value that I care about. And
Yeah,
that's what I've been trying to do recently to have like a healthier relationship with, well, not even a healthy relationships, but to find reasons to want money in the first place, if that makes sense. Like I'm trying to not just like get money and then keep going. I'm trying to be like, okay, well, I'm earning to be able to live an experience I want, and that experience is this. A bit like I imagine you could do the same thing for you in terms of like you working out and gym and Muay Thai and all that stuff, and seeing how like, yeah, this money goes towards my physical well-being in this particular way, and then beyond that, like it being like a hobby or a craft that you want to improve in and things like that. So I think that that's only something you can do once you start reaching the point where I mean, maybe now it will become very obvious. This will make more sense for you to do now, because when you're not just living month to month, you really are then starting to kind of realize like, oh, this extra money I have could go towards these things that I know would be a good for me and I can put a value to in the long run.
yeah, and that's it. That's it. Really, it's like adapting to this is gonna be fun. I feel like I'm gonna learn a lot of lessons about me, my ADHD, just how because the last time I had like this amount of money was like when I was in professional wrestling and being like a teacher at the same time. I was like, cool, like you're living a life here, and luckily my relationship with money has always been the same. I don't really care for it, but then there's definitely patterns which I tend to follow. So there's been times I've bought like a football shirt where I've just been like in a this will make me feel better mood, and what tends to happen is I buy it for myself and it'll arrive. I'll feel really good about it, but then I'll be like, oh shit, I have the money. Oh no. Now I don't do that as much. Now what I tend to do is I tend to set aside like a little bit of money, and then once every month or once every 2 months, I haven't done it in like 2.5 months now, I'll buy like 5 football shirts for under £100. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, cool. It's a nice little like treat to give yourself. But I'm like, now it's an increased stress. Now it's working more hours. Now it's working practically every single day of the week I'm working. And it's like, well, see, does the pot that you put the money into for football shirts, does that increase now? Do we go
Well,
over the 100?
I was going to say that this is the one caveat I would give to this is that you have to. I think you have to be slightly wary that you don't just fall into a sort of consumerist like cycle. Um, I want to eat better food, but it doesn't just mean that I. But does it mean that I go around buying the most expensive version of anything? It's like, no, not really, because some things I know don't really provide that level
Yeah,
of.
like you're not going to buy
It's
like a
not that
Waitrose
important.
cheesecake instead of a Tesco cheesecake, you know?
Yeah, and I, in my case, for example, like if I was to have baked beans, for example, I don't, I know that everyone loves Heinz, and I'm not saying Heinz isn't good. I'm just saying that like I really don't mind buying the cheapest baked beans. It doesn't really bother me. So I'm not. So at that point, I'm going to continue doing that. I'd rather spend, it's not even that much of a difference in the long run, but like it it's something I enjoy, and I'm not even saying that that's a particularly consumerist, like anti-consumerist thought to be like, aha, I get the cheap beans. No, but like, but it's like, okay, well, there's two faceless companies. What the fuck am I going to do? Yeah, I'll choose, I'll choose the cheap one or whatever versus buying it elsewhere. It does mean I get to, it does mean if I think about it in a certain way, I do get to kind of like be a patron to like smaller businesses and things like that, like bakeries or to like the like Asian supermarkets and stuff, which I think is or like the Polish supermarkets as well, which I think is a kind of a nice, which I think is kind of a nice, like, yeah, this is where like I think like the value of my money being what it is, like, okay, how much is it really? There's sort of like okay, well, I'm providing in a different way. Like it's kind of like I'm slightly tipping a place just for existing. I'd rather it be there than like a big supermarket, for example. So I think there's sorry, went a bit off there. But the point is that I think as long as you're thinking about where your money goes and you're not just throwing it onto the pile, like how many football shirts, I mean, maybe this is a bad question to ask you, but how many football shirts do you require until you're satisfied? Like, I don't know. I don't know what the answer.
The goal
I
is
don't know.
My
1,000.
goal is to own 1,000 football shirts. Okay, and I love when I tell people this. The looks of absurdity. Like I think hello Ryan, has been the only person who's looked at me and went, okay. Everyone else has been like, where are you going to keep them? Like the most immature people I know, okay, have been very quick to stand up and go, the practicality of this, like they want to break down, like, so let's say your apartment, you have to have a separate room in your apartment for the football shirts. Do you understand how mental that is? I'm like, yes, that's why I'm not going to have a separate room for them, you fucking idiot. It's called boxes. Boxes exist. But I thought you're supposed to hang them all up. No, that's stupid. Use your common sense, okay? You box the ones that you just bought for the sake of buying. For example, if I have a team in the 3rd division of a random Balkan island, don't really need to hang that one up, do I? Okay, but I have it. It's cool. But guess what? Probably going to want to hang up, what's a dumb shirt I have? Oh, yeah. Like my Arsenal Raheem Sterling shirt. Yeah, going to want to hang that one up. My Dominic Solanke Bournemouth shirt. Yeah, going to want to hang that shit up.
People who have listened to the podcast know about your fiending for football shirts, so they shouldn't be too surprised, but it is still very funny.
Anyway, yeah, like I'm about to order some now, and I've had to pick out specific countries, okay? And that's been a thing.
The only thing I'll say is that you probably don't need to have more shirts every month because you'll eventually just reach the 1,000 anyway. Like, you've got enough months in your life.
I haven't done a count yet. You've got to catch them all.
There are over 1,000 Pokemon now, so it kind of fits.
Yeah, boy. Anyway, plowing ahead. Welcome back from the damned, Joe.
Hey, yeah. So I was dead for a while. So we had the last time that we were together and recording, episode 42, I had been through like a bad time. I'd come back from holiday, which was great, but I was having a really bad time after that. And then we ended up recording. It's funny when we spoke about it, and like when we started chatting again, I really couldn't even think of what it was. I couldn't remember anything, like not of the episode because I actually listened to the episode, but I couldn't remember anything that happened in between that holiday and when I spoke to you the first time, and then the holiday and when I was speaking to you in that moment. And then the podcast episode, and then when we were speaking to you in that moment. Like when we sort of like jokingly use the term dead. You started it, but like we jokingly say like, oh, like how long were you dead for, or like where did you go, or essentially it's just a where did you go. And then we try and I was in the Duat, or I was in, I don't know, like Elysium or something. Probably not Elysium. I think that's a good place, but you know what I mean, the underworld. And I was in Tartarus, no, and it's like, but there is a feeling of like, yeah, I kind of because I felt so shit, I genuinely don't really have anything. My mind literally can't think of anything good about, like, to even think about, or like anything sort of anything that kind of sits within me. But this time has been a big one. We spoke about therapy, and you were talking about, and it was funny because you started off somewhere by saying, oh, like I'm sure you would agree that that therapy is a good thing, and I am effectively, and I'm on the path to get therapy now. So I had the breakdown again, and things were bad. I wasn't talking to anyone. I wasn't talking to work. I had some days where I was off work, and we've had meetings. So now some things have changed with work. So now I don't work as much on the weekends. This is a temporary fixture. We'll see what ends up happening in the future. I speaking openly. I should say, by the way, just in case Tesco's has some like big thing they want to, just to make it clear, my experience with around this and the people who were working at my Tesco's was the people who were working at my Tesco's, including the management, were very good. So I've had a much better experience than I was expecting. And of course, I think my expectations of what's going to happen may be a bit overtuned, as my GP has kind of told me that it really sounds like you have anxiety that I have probably not thought about in a long time. Because I've given the story from, maybe I'm going all over the place here, and I think you can tell almost by the way I talk now that I self-analyze that I do talk like I'm nervous about everything. When I was 21, I had a kind of moment when I was living with a friend, and for some reason it felt like my general anxiety seemed to go away and my social anxiety seemed to disappear. And in the moment, I genuinely felt that was the case. And because and some of my behaviors were still the same, so I still made myself isolated a lot of the time, but I didn't feel socially anxious or generally anxious like I did back then. So I've always, even when I've had like these moments where I say, oh yeah, sometimes I feel socially anxious at the house, but generally I'm quite good, or whatever, even if it causes me lots of problems. And certainly during this period, I was not engaging with people to the point of even including people in my own house. I even then I still didn't think that I had anxiety in such a way that could be classified as a disorder or anything like that. But it's becoming maybe a little bit recognizable that actually maybe I do. And it's just, there was such a difference between the expression of how that felt internally at the time as a before and after, that I really had felt like I'd changed completely. And, from that point, it didn't feel like there was anything that needed to be looked at or dealt with and so on. So it's been a little bit of an interesting period as a result, that I am now seeking help around my addiction to YouTube, because I was very, very adamant that I needed some help in this. CBT, I haven't started yet. I've been referred. There's an email that's been sent and I've got a copy of it, talking about the fact that, like, that saying that they will like send me a letter and then I'll go to them. So we'll see how good that is. But even then, I think me and my GP are probably going to have more discussions about, and as time goes on, more discussions about that kind of anxiety section of things, and seeing if there is actually something to that maybe shouldn't be ignored and should be considered in a different light, and that I should probably get some therapy for. Including also, she mentioned, she was like, oh, have you ever had did you ever have any therapy for autism, around like autism stuff? Because obviously not necessarily, it's not like I'm getting rid of autism by doing so, but because that's not how autism works. But the sort of like the things that autism is more likely to make come up, like addiction, like anxiety, like depression. And I said no, because I never did. Like, I got a diagnosis during the COVID era, and I felt very, and I don't know, like there was a lot of other things I was dealing with, like being at uni in my and trying to get my stuff done there, that I was just happy enough that I could be, considered for an extension on something, um, and not be considered like, as if I was lying about my mental state, and about the issues that I was suffering from. So I didn't really even think about the idea of, okay, well, maybe there is someone I need to talk to about this. And apparently the center will be able to might be able to provide some things relating to that. So it's a weird time in that, like, I'm now actually dealing with my issues more directly, and that I'm getting involved in the systems that might be able to do so. But obviously this is following a really, really shit time. And it's honestly weird talking now, because considering that more like a little over a week ago, I hadn't spoken to you since we'd recorded that episode, and I'd just generally been incredibly anxious to talk to you for so long. And I don't know what that says. I don't really know why, because you were the last person that I spoke to about this, and I felt that was so. And even at the time, I was like, I don't really know why. I couldn't really explain it to myself, but it was the most difficult thing to try and do. And I think when we spoke, you asked if it was like, was it like guilt and stuff? And then I almost immediately said, yeah, I think it is. And I, again, this is really, really adding on to the whole anxiety thing, and also the fact that I have an avoidant personality, which is an incredibly, if you have if you have very high anxiety, then one option you have is to run away from the thing that's making you anxious, which is not good, by the way, in case you're wondering, for anyone listening, because it means you don't get to experience the thing, which means your anxiety goes up the next time that happens, and then you to the same amount that it was before, because you don't get to practice effectively what the experience is like, and so your body gets used to having a certain anxiety response every time you come across it. So yeah, all in all, there is so much I could say about like the qualitative experience of what happened, which may, I think, have to come out in further episodes from now, as I like kind of meditate upon everything. And of course, I'm in a better state right now because I'm dealing with these things, and because I'm making a very active effort towards being on YouTube a lot less, and be around everyone more. I will say, actually, that, just to add to this, to the YouTube stuff, like one of my favorite days of all time was I think about 2 days into me not listening to, or it was like 2 or 3 days. Yeah, I guess it would be 2 full days into not engaging with YouTube. And I went to the Malvern Hills. For the Malvern Hills is Malvern is the town, and then or slash city, and then the Malvern Hills is a place not far from where I am, and did a 12-mile walk around and over the Malvern Hills, and it was one of my favorite days I've had in a very, very long time. And I was purely by myself. I spent almost all of it talking to myself, which again was funny, because when I said that to my GP, she said, "Oh yeah, that's very much in line with anxiety." I spoke to myself for almost 6 hours, just stopping myself whenever people were nearby, because I looked like a crazy person. And I mean, that's, to be fair, that's something I've done literally all my life. So it's kind of it's kind of funny. Like when I said to her, like, I've done it since I was a child, like that I never really kind of thought about it that way. I think I actually associated it more with like autism, and just said like, oh, it's an autistic thing. But I know loads of autistic people who don't do that. And so yeah, sorry. And it was a beautiful day. We've had very good weather recently, and it was so nice, and it made me realize that I not only do I love walking, but I really do love being able to be in the open space like that, and just how much happier I was just exploring the world, and how I love being. And I spoke to a bunch of people on the walk, like, and it was very nice. yeah, I don't know. Like it was just genuinely a wonderful experience, and like all I can think of now is I just want to like do stuff like that with other people as well.
Yeah.
Just talking and walking around places, and yeah.
These are well, hey, we're all going to see each other very soon though, because we have, of course, Kester Stag do coming up, but also we have the wedding. Like, it's yeah. And I think the beautiful thing about all this is that before you disappeared, you were talking about like finding like new friends as well, talking to different people from work. So like whenever you disappear, I've never been like, oh, I hate Joe. Like, oh, he's doing this again. Like it's always just like, when he comes back, he'll be, you know, he'll be fine. Like,
Yeah, you actually kind of stated it really clearly as well for me that like when I'm in those states, the thing is okay, I will if I'm feeling like I can't like when my anxiety seemingly gets really high, I I don't show up, I don't talk to you, I won't answer calls and all of this sort of stuff. I avoid. And then on top of that is that there's obviously a vicious cycle where that avoidance makes me think that everyone hates me now because I'm also undermining my own like morals as well to a certain extent. Like I am genuinely running away from my own feeling of right and wrong. Like I'm literally deciding that I'm not going to engage with this thing, which means that I'm now feeling like I've let someone down, and I've let and whether that person feels that way or not is technically not even that important in a way, because it's how I feel about what I've done. So there's very much a like I've talked in the past about I'm now blanking I'm really you I'm blanking on who it was, but the one that said that cowardice was like bravery is the most important virtue or something like that, because if you can't stand up for your beliefs, um, then what does it matter? Essentially, I butchered that the phrasing completely.
but I get what you mean.
But the idea that like the idea that like I've always kind of had a bit of a recognition, or sometimes I'll call myself like a coward in moments, and on the podcast as well, or I'll call myself like pathetic on occasion in a very similar way. And I think that it's clear that this has always been an issue for me that I've never been able to get past, and it does undermine my own feeling of myself, and that ultimately is this, and that avoid and the fact that it does that then creates this really vicious, anxious cycle where I just think that everyone must hate me completely, and to go and then I want to avoid, trying to go back to the situation. It's like I probably would be a person thinking about it that if I entered into a relationship that I can't say for certain that I wouldn't go someone. Like I really can't. Like, which is a sad thing to say because I don't agree that that should be a thing I do. But there's a real part of me that's like, but would I though? Given the way I've acted over my life, I really could imagine it, and that's not a happy thing. So it's definitely something I need to work on, and I think that definitely like therapy will help in that regard.
Yeah, like, are you? Because am I wrong in saying that you've never like had? Have you had therapy before?
I've had an equivalent concept again. I would say it is therapy, but it depends on the classification because I think that because they would be considered like a student counselor or something like that. Someone, I met people and spoke to people regularly who were, who knew about different kinds of therapies, including CBT. So it was explained to me pretty well. Back then, also, I did study at A level, and then we went through talking about lots of stuff, and that did actually help a lot because that helped me a lot with my social perceptions of like me thinking that I have to be the person that always the burden comes on me in a social situation or a relationship with someone, that if it's not going well then it's my fault, rather than like you have to both input into it because it's a relationship, it's not a monologue, it's a dialogue, not a monologue. So I could argue that yes, I have had therapy just purely by the fact that it worked in those ways as well.
Like, because I'm probably going to be restarting therapy soon as well, and I'm very well, given my new job, which we discussed in the last episode. I'm being a youth mentor, effectively, and it's kind of funny how even in your case, student council and things like that, how therapy is really important for some people. It doesn't work for other people, and there are different ideas, different treatments, and things like that, and how we are old people now, Joe. We're like fucking late 20s, and we're still discovering different things about us. Like, you come to terms with the idea that anxiety might be a thing that you just have, you know, pressures with like, and in my case, just new anxieties existing, and it exists in battles, but being fought on different battlefields. It's just like, oh, there's a clear, I'm noticing a clear problem for me with like discovery, you know?
Tell me about that.
If that
Sorry.
makes, if that makes any sense, like discovering who we are, like, because if you think you have it all down pat, you know, oh look, I'm like a very left wing liberal, very like I know I have ADHD, I know this and this and this, and like I know how I feel about this, and I know what gets me anxious, and I know what gets me, I know how my ADHD affects me, and bang, like, oh, I'm now really anxious about having like money. Like, that's new. Oh, I'm really anxious about like having fun and enjoying good moments and celebrating like big wins. Oh, that's new. Like, and a shot for me. Like discovering something that hurts you or something that affects you in a negative manner, I guess.
Yeah, I really hope I never calcify in, and stop wanting to improve or stop thinking that I need to consider, that I need to be open-minded about these things, because it is really easy. And I think sometimes it's really easy just because when you start defining yourself or when you start defining things in the world, that provides you the route, even if it's not, even if it's an inefficient route or a bad route or a route that actually goes to the wrong place, but you just have the wrong idea about where you are, where you've gotten to by following it. It provides a route for you. It's like it's like you're building the roads, but you don't know where you're building them to. You don't really know like where it is that you're building them, and you don't know like how to. And the only thing that you can work off is other people showing you how they rode their life and how they rode their understanding of things, and you having to, and you going, well, they've done it and they seem to be, successful. They seem to be good in XY way. So I will do something similar. And then you learn later on that your parents are real people and aren't perfect. And you're like, oh shit, okay, so maybe some of the things they said aren't right. And then you start like so you get all of this. So trying to like format yourself in this way. And of course we've seen so many older people, big ups to the older people. But some older people are fucking nuts. Like they just are, as well as some people that are our age, to be clear. But like, seeing like the potential future we could have by looking at older people, you're like, God, I hope I don't become one of those people who can't see why they're wrong. Like I really don't want to. I want to work hard not to do that. And I should be clear, I've actually had some interactions with older people, let's say like at least 16 years older, or maybe even 18. I actually don't know their age entirely. And we were talking about stuff, and they were like, yeah, and he was actually really good about explaining how, he's trying to understand like certain concepts, but even if he struggles, and this would be his relationship to like LGBT or gender and other sorts of concepts like that. And it's like, and I was like, mate, I can't, like, even if you're struggling with it or if it doesn't make sense to you, like immediately, like I can't help but be like, you should be proud of that. Like you should be proud that you're trying. You should be proud that you recognize there are things that you want to like understand better and like make sense of. Like it genuinely was quite heart touching for me, like listening to him in a very simple way just say, I really like I want to, and I think a lot of it is because of relationship to his to family members, or relationship to and things like that, which have pushed him on it. Like genuine love for that person has meant that there's this weird scenario where he doesn't understand something that this person is saying, and it's not, So it's like really, I'm glad that that these people do exist, because it's really easy to get bogged down in the people who don't, and to feel like there is no change in the world. There's no that people are going to just that there is no hope. But there really is, I think, and it does exist. You just have to be open to allowing people to do that just as much as they have to be open to doing it themselves, right?
Yeah, 100%. And you're right. Like, hoping that we don't become those old people who we hate, effectively, who refuse to see how they're wrong. Because it's really sad right now is that they're being elected into power. So, like, we have to fight to keep an open mind, and hopefully, like, there's a point in which the next generation of older people, they're like the last of this generation, where now they're progressive to new ideas, and they're able to listen, they're able to connect and empathize with people who are younger than them, and people who are maybe more clued into things than them. And that's it. That's all we can hope for. That the next generation is slightly better. But history tends to repeat itself, so, where do we go from there? But yeah, I think it's time for Choo-choo recommendation station. Joe, kick us off.
My one's a bit out there. I will send you the specific. It will be in the description. I'm going to send Alex the specific link for this. But there's a book by Jessica Fern called Polysecure, which is entirely about attachment theory, and this is a psychological theory. But the sexy part is largely about relationships and polyamory. So they are polyamorous themselves, and they do talk about that the experience of growing up, and their relationship to that as they got older and so on. Even if I think it's fun to listen. I think it's a good thing to read regardless of of your thoughts, because the book isn't designed to tell you that you should be polyamorous. That's not the point. The book is to talk about that polyamory should be considered just like anything else, and not be, and that there are weird ideas that exist in relationships that don't need to exist there, and talking about effectively like health. And in essence, it really, because of the way that it goes through it through attachment theory, talking about, hey, how do monogamous relationships, how do they how to be healthy in them, like the kinds of things that you'll see. And also, in if anything, I think it's actually pretty good at getting you to maybe realize the ways in which you yourself feel. What's the right way of saying this? Like the kind of insecurities that exist within people. So I thought it was really good. And the reason I'm recommending this isn't just because it's because it's a book, you can read it or whatever, but there is a free version of it that you can read on like a laptop or some device or whatever, on the archive, internetarchive.org. So it's perfectly free. You can read it. It's available, and so I've just been reading it from over time, and there are bits of it that are more dense than others, but I guarantee you that like it's worth. If there's bits you don't like, if there's bits that are too dense, because sometimes they are, I think you're not too bad to scan through those bits and get, because it will have bits that are less dense, and I think are at least in my case, for example, it was more interesting to read about and get insight on, like as you go through the book. It's not like, oh, we've had the easy bit, now let's get into the really dense part right up until the end. and then it's like conclusion, and then you just go and read the conclusion. Like, it's worth reading through the whole thing. Polysecure.
Cool. I am bringing to you two things. One is UFC 5. It is free on. It's free for me on PlayStation Plus. I think it's on EA now. It is not a game you want to spend any money on. You just want to download it for free. Get the 10-hour trial, because the ragdolls of just knocking people out and them slumping to the floor hilariously is hilarious, and it makes me laugh. That's literally it. It's so like dumb, but it's a really good way to just have a good laugh when you kick somebody in the head and their body somehow rolls up into a ball and then they're just in the floor. It's great. It's a game. It's an EA Sports game, which means it's going to be just not as good as it could be. But it's fun, especially if you get it free. My second one is Above the Waves by Float Omen. Found them on YouTube. Good band. That's it. That is it. Anything else?
No, I think that's it. Let's finish this.
Boom. We're going to take 2 steps to the rear and get out of here. We're in the wind. See ya.
Ciao.